The Merchant's Dowry. Sequel to Toss a Coin. By F. E. Woolenbecker. Narrated by Revoicer. 1. Sarai waited behind the stable for Richard. Though the partygoers couldn't see her, she could hear their raucous laughter mingle with the music coming from her father's mansion. She had hoped he would come. She gave him the invitation personally and witnessed the heat in his eyes, the heat that was present whenever they met. But the heat had died the moment his hand touched the envelope. Still, she had prayed he would come tonight. She picked her dress especially for him. It was a frilly, ice blue ball gown, and she had worn her hair up tonight and bound it with a string of pearls. In the 2 weeks since her father's last coin toss, she had considered his words. He had been willing to risk his life to marry her and wanted to know how far she would go for him. A hand, large, strong and warm, rested upon her shoulder. She turned to meet her father's blue-eyed gaze. He towered over her like an old oak, and was just as rigid. Tonight, he wore a violet waistcoat with a red shirt and a gold brooch with a silver silhouette of a horse at his throat. "He hasn't come, has he?" Sarai shook her head. "This is my fault." Self-admonishments were rare when they came from him, but were well-deserved when they did. Making him risk 2 years' savings should have been enough. Another man had won your second bet before Richard. If 2 bets were enough, I would be betrothed to him now. Santiago wrapped an arm around her shoulders and guided her back to the party. "No matter, dear heart. Tonight, we eat, drink and dance, and tomorrow, we fetch your bridegroom." 2. Sarai led her father down the town's main street, where merchants showed off everything from spices to furniture, to a little workshop where they found Richard oblivious to anything else, boring a hole in the corner of a chair. Sarai watched him work in his shirt sleeves, the muscles in his forearms rippling under the stress of his labor. Her father cleared his throat. "I should have just given you 200 pieces of silver to see what you would do with it." Richard straightened and rolled his shoulder with a satisfied groan. His muscles weren't large enough to be intimidating by any means, but they were lean and strong and capable of doing anything Richard needed from them. Couple that with his hair, the color of toasted oats, and those chestnut brown eyes that burned when they fell upon her, and it would be easy for anybody who wasn't blind to see he could catch the eye of any woman. But it was his gentle way with her father's horses that caught Sarai's heart. Her father pulled a small sack of coins from his pocket and tossed it to Richard. "Here's your bride and her dowry." Richard tossed the sack back. "As you can see, I have no need for your money." An idea struck Sarai. She might not be able to die for Richard like he was willing to for her, but she could give up her life. "Do you have need of me?" A glimmer of hope sparked in his expression. "What do you mean?" "If you won't come to me, I'll come to you." A crooked smile, not one of malice but one that promised a little mischief, appeared on his face. "Toss me that bag." Richard caught the sack and pulled out 2 coins. "This is just so nobody can say she came to me empty-handed." Sarai ran into his arms, and they shared their first kiss in 2 weeks. He brushed a strand of hair from her face and kissed her again. "I'll be late coming home tonight. A friend suffered an injury and a few of us are helping with his work." 3. Sarai woke up naked the next morning to a woman shouting, "Oi, you gonna sleep all day, lazy bones?" 5 stern women scowled down at her with crossed arms. The oldest, a white-haired matron who looked old enough to be a grandmother, spoke. "Being a wife is more than looking beautiful and pleasing your man in the bed. Any floozy can do that much. Richard gave you a house, you have to make it a home." Sarai looked around. The house contained a small stove and oven, a table with 2 wooden chairs, and a small bed with a straw mattress where she and Richard had spent a magnificent first night together. It was all the home she needed. "He will give you food, it's your job to make it a meal." But you don't know how to do any of that, do you? After Sarai had dressed in a sturdy brown skirt and white blouse, the women set to making her into what they deemed a proper wife. By showing her how to clean a house and teaching her how not to ruin a meal. Sarai cooked and cleaned until she was sore, exhausted, and resented Richard for making her go through all this for him, until one of the wives reminded her of how hard he had worked for her. Sarai eventually got used to her routine. She would wake with Richard each morning and see him off. Then she would care for the house and prepare the evening meal. After dinner, they cleaned the dishes together before playing a game or two of chess, then going to bed and making love. The skin on her hands and knees eventually became hard, and she couldn't remember the last time she made herself up for Richard, but she also couldn't remember the last time she didn't wake up naked. Summer gave way to autumn, then to winter, which came with good news: Sarai was with child. She should have known it was too good to be true, because a runner crashed through the door and told her that Richard had broken his leg. Sarai looked down at her husband as he stared up at the ceiling. "Richard, talk to me. I have no idea how I'm going to take care of you." She bent down to give him a kiss, but he turned his head. Sarai grabbed his face with both hands and made him face her. "Don't you dare shut me out. How can I provide for you if I can't even walk?" She gave Richard a kiss. He didn't resist this time. "Then you have to let me provide for you." "How?" "I have an idea." Sarai took a single gold coin, all that was left of her dowry, to Minnie, the grandmother who first initiated her in the ways of wives. The old woman gave her a hug. "Is there anything you need, dear?" Two honest answers. "How good are my pies? And what kind of oven can I buy with this?" While her new oven was being constructed, Sarai showed her pies to all 5 of the towns and keepers and secured orders from all of them. Within 3 days she had a thriving business. While 5 pies were in the oven, Sarai prepared 5 more, and was able to find 2 boys with a wagon to deliver them so she could concentrate on her work. All the while, Richard kneaded the dough at the table, brimming with pride. That would teach him to doubt a merchant's daughter. When Richard's leg had healed, he took over caring for the home as Sarai's belly swelled and her business flourished. Eventually, Santiago came to visit and wrapped her up in a tight hug. "Well done, daughter, very well done. And Richard, now that you've seen how far my Sarai would go for you, I think it's time the 2 of you came home." Thank you for listening to The Merchant's Dowry, by F.E. Woolenbecker. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to show your appreciation in a more monetary fashion, please spend $1 and buy a book. You can find them on Kindle, Apple, and Nook.